day three of Jonathan Livingston Seagull, journeying with Jonathan Livingston Seagull friends. And as we all know that Jonathan Livingston Seagull is inspiring us and is making us understand about life and is making us understand about how to be not ordinary and how to fly high. And here he came back and he's guiding this young seagull, Fletcher. I want to just read few lines that we had read yesterday and continue with part three. So when Jonathan asked Fletcher Seagull, do you want to fly? Then Fletcher Seagull says, yes, I want to fly. Now, Lynn Seagull, do you want to fly so much that you will forgive the flock and learn and go back to them Monday and work to help them know? So Fletcher said, I do. Then Fletch, let's begin with level flight. And from there, the next part continues. Jonathan circled slowly over the far cliffs, watching. This rough young Fletcher gull was very nearly a perfect flight student. He was strong and light and quick in the air, but far and away more important, he had a blazing drive to learn to fly. Here he came this minute, a blurred grey shape roaring out of a dive, flashing 150 miles per hour past his instructor. He pulled abruptly into another try at a 16-point vertical slow roll, calling the points out loud. 8, 9, 10. See, Jonathan, I'm running out of airspeed. 11. I want good sharp stops like yours. 12. But blast, I just can't make. 13. These last 3 points without 14. Fletcher's whip stall at the top was all the worse for his rage and fury at falling. He fell backward, tumbled, slammed savagely into an inverted spin, and recovered at last, panting, 100 feet below his instructor's level. You're wasting your time with me, Jonathan. I'm too dumb. I'm too stupid. I try and try, but I will never get it. Jonathan Seagull looked down at him and nodded. You will never get it for sure as long as you make that pull up so hard. I want to repeat this, friends. You will never get it for sure as long as you make that pull up so hard. Fletcher, you lost 40 miles an hour in the entry. You have to be smooth. Firm but smooth, remember. He dropped down to the level of the younger girl. Let's try together now in formation and pay attention to that pull up. It's a smooth, easy entry. By the end of 3 months, Jonathan had 6 other students, outcast all, yet curious about this strange new idea of flight for the joy of flying. Still, it was easier for them to practice high performance than it was to understand the reason behind it. Each of us is in truth an idea of that great gull, an unlimited idea of freedom, Jonathan would say in the evenings on the beach. And precision flying is a step towards expressing our real nature. Everything that limits us, everything that limits us, we have to put aside. That's why all this high speed practice and low speed and aerobatics. And his students would be asleep, exhausted from the day's flying. They liked the practice because it was fast and exciting, and it fed a hunger for learning that grew with every lesson. But not one of them, not even Fletcher Gull, had come to believe that the flight of ideas could possibly be as real as the flight of wind and feather. Your whole body, from wingtip to wingtip, Jonathan would say, other times, is nothing more than your thought itself in a form you can see. Break the chains of your thought. and you break the chains of your body too. But no matter how he said it sounded like pleasant fiction, and they needed more to sleep. It was only a month later that Jonathan said the time had come to return to the flock. We are not ready, said Henry Calvin Gull. We are not welcome. We are outcast. We can't force ourselves to go where we are not welcome, can we? We are free to go where we wish and to be what we are, Jonathan answered. And he lifted from the sand and turned east toward the home grounds of the flock. There was brief anguish among his students, for it is the law of the flock that an outcast never returns. And the law had not been broken once in 10,000 years. The law said, stay. Jonathan said, go. And by now he was a mile across the water. If they waited much longer, he would reach a hostile flock alone. Well, we don't have to obey the law if we are not a part of the flock, do we? Fletcher said, rather self consciously. Besides, if there is a fight, will be a lot more help there than here. And so they flew in from the west that morning, 8 of them in a double diamond formation, wingtips almost overlapping. They came across the flock's council beach at 135 miles per hour, Jonathan in the lead, Fletcher smoothly at his right wing, Henry Calvin struggling gamely at his left. Then the whole formation rolled slowly to the right as one bird, level to inverted to level, the wind whipping over them all. The squawks and grockles of everyday life in the flock were cut off, as though the formation were a giant knife, and 8,000 gull eyes watched, without a single blink. One by one, each of the 8 birds pulled sharply upward into a full loop and flew all the way around to a dead slow stand up, landing on the sand. Then, as though this sort of thing happened every day, Jonathan Seagull began his critique of the flight. To begin with, he said with a wry smile, you were all a bit late on the join up. It went like lightning through the flock. Those birds are outcast and they have returned. And that can't happen. Fletcher's predictions of battle melted in the flock's confusion. Well, sure, okay, they are outcast, said some of the younger gulls. But hey, man, where did they learn to fly like that? It took almost an hour for the word of the elder to pass through the flock. Ignore them. The gull who speaks to an outcast is himself outcast. The gull who looks upon an outcast breaks the law of the flock. Grey feathered backs were turned upon Jonathan from that moment onward. But he didn't appear to notice. He held his practice sessions directly over the council beach and for the first time began pressing his students to the limit of their ability. Martin Gull, he shouted across the sky. You say you know low speed flying. You know nothing till you prove it. Fly. So quiet little Martin William Seagull, startled to be caught under his instructor's fire, surprised him and became a wizard of low speeds. In the lightest breeze, he could curve his feathers to lift himself without a single flap of wing from sand to cloud and down again. Likewise, Charles Roland Gull flew the great mountain wind to 24,000 feet, came down blue from the cold, thin air, amazed and happy, determined to go still higher tomorrow. Like a gull who loved aerobatics like no other else, conquered his 16-point vertical slow roll and the next day topped it off with a triple cartwheel, his feathers flashing white sunlight to a beach from which more than one's furtive eye watched. Every hour, Jonathan was there at the side of each of his students, demonstrating, suggesting, pressuring, guiding. He flew with them through night and cloud and storm for the sport of it, while the flock huddled miserably on the ground. When the flying was done, the students relaxed on the sand, and in time they listened more closely to Jonathan. He had some crazy ideas that they couldn't understand, but then he had some good ones that they could. Gradually, in the night, another circle formed around the circle of students, a circle of curious gulls listening in the darkness for hours on end, not wishing to see or be seen of one another, fading away before daybreak. It was a month after the return that the first gull of the flock crossed the line and asked her to learn how to fly. In his asking, Terence Lowell Gull became a condemned bird, labeled outcast, and the eighth of Jonathan's students. The next night, from the flock came Kirk Maynard Gull, wobbling across the sand, dragging his left wing to collapse at Jonathan's feet. Help me, he said very quietly, speaking in the way that the dying speak. I want to fly more than anything else in the world. Come along then, said Jonathan. Climb with me away from the ground and we will begin. You don't understand. My wing. I can't move my wing. Maynard girl, you have the freedom to be yourself, your true self, here and now, and nothing can stand in your way. It is the law of the great gull, the law that is. Are you saying I can fly? I say you are free. As simply and as quickly as that, Kirk Maynard Gull spread his wings effortlessly and lifted into the dark night air. The flock was roused from sleep by his cry, as loud as he could scream it, from 500 feet up. I can fly, listen, I can fly. By sunrise, there were nearly 1,000 birds standing outside the circle of students, looking curiously at Maynard. They didn't care whether they were seen or not, and they listened, trying to understand Jonathan Seagull. He spoke of very simple things, that it is right for a gull to fly, that freedom is the very nature of his being, that whatever stands against that freedom must be set aside, be it a ritual or a superstition or limitation in any form. Set aside came a voice from the multitude, even if it be the law of the flock, the only true law, the only true law is that which leads to freedom, Jonathan said. There is no other. How do you expect us to fly as you fly? Came another voice. You are special and gifted and divine above other birds. Look at Fletcher, Lowell, Charles Roland, Judy Lee. Are they also special and gifted and divine? No more than you are, no more than I am. The only difference, the very only one, is that they have begun to understand what they really are and have begun to practice it. His students, say Fletcher, shifted uneasily. They hadn't realized that this was what they were doing. The crowd grew larger every day, coming to question, to idolize, to scorn. They are saying in the flock that if you are not the son of the great gull himself, Fletcher told Jonathan one morning after advanced speed practice, then you are 1,000 years ahead of your time. Jonathan sighed. The price of being misunderstood, he thought. They call you devil or they call you God. What do you think, Fletch? Are we ahead of our time? A long silence. Well, this kind of lying has always been here to be learned by anybody who wanted to discover it. That's got nothing to do with time. We are ahead of the fashion, maybe, ahead of the way that most gulls fly. That's something, said Jonathan, rolling to glide inverted for a while. That's not half as bad as being ahead of our time. It happened just a week later. Fletcher was demonstrating the elements of high speed flying to a class of new students. He had just pulled out of his dive from 7,000 feet, a long gray streak firing a few inches above the beach, when a young bird on its first flight glided directly into his path, calling for its mother. With a tenth of a second to avoid the youngster, Fletcher Lynn's Seagull snapped hard to the left at something over 200 miles per hour into a cliff of a solid granite. It was for him as though the rock were a giant hard door into another world. A burst of fear and shock and black as he hit. And then he was adrift in a strange sky, forgetting, remembering, forgetting, afraid and sad and sorry, terribly sorry. The voice came to him as it had in the first day that he had met Jonathan Livingston Seagull. The trick, Fletcher, is that we are trying to overcome our limitations in order, patiently. We don't tackle flying through rock until a little later in the program. Jonathan, also known as the son of the great gull, his instructor said dryly. What are you doing here? The cliff? Haven't I? Didn't I die? Oh, Fletch, come on. Think if you're talking to me now, then obviously you didn't die, did you? What you did manage to do was to change your level of consciousness rather abruptly. It's a choice now. You can stay here and learn on this level, which is quite a bit higher than the one you left, by the way. Or you can go back and keep working with the flock. The elders were hoping for some kind of disaster, but they are startled that you obliged them so well. I want to go back to the flock, of course. I have barely begun with the new group. Very well, Fletcher. Remember what we were saying about one's body being nothing more than thought itself. Wow. Remember what we were saying about one's body being nothing more than thought itself. Fletcher shook his head and stretched his wings and opened his eyes at the base of the cliff in the center of the whole flock assembled. There was a great clamor of quacks and screams from the cloud when first he moved. He lives. He that was dead lives. Touched him with a wingtip, brought him to life. The son of the great gull. No, he denies it. He's a devil. Devil? Come to break the flock. There were 4,000 gulls in the crowd, frightened at what had happened, and the cry, devil, went through them like the wind of an ocean storm. Eyes glazed, beaks sharp, they closed in to destroy. Would you feel better if we left, Fletcher? Asked Jonathan. I certainly wouldn't object too much if we did. Instantly, they stood together a half mile away, and the flashing beaks of the mob closed on empty air. Why is it, Jonathan puzzled, that the hardest thing in the world is to convince a bird that he is free and that he can prove it for himself if he had just spent a little time practicing? Why should that be so hard? Fletcher still blinked from the chance change of scene. What did you just do? How did we get here? You did say you wanted to be out of the mob, didn't you? Yes, but how did you? Like everything else, Fletcher, practice. By morning, the flock had forgotten its insanity, but Fletcher had not. Jonathan, remember what you said a long time ago about loving the flock enough to return to it and help it learn. Sure, I don't understand how you manage to love a mob of birds that has just tried to kill you. Oh, Fletch, you don't love that. You don't love hatred and evil, of course. You have to practice and see the real gull, the good in every one of them, and to help them see it in themselves. That's what I mean by love. It's fun when you get the knack of it. I remember a fierce young bird, for instance, Fletcher Lynn Seagull, his name. just been made outcast, ready to fight the flock to the death, getting a start on building his own bitter hell out on the far cliffs. And here he's today building his own heaven instead and leading the whole flock in that direction. Fletcher turned to his instructor, and there was a moment of fright in his eye. Me leading? What do you mean, me leading? You are the instructor here. You couldn't leave. Couldn't I? Don't you think that there might be other flocks, other Fletchers that need an instructor more than this one that's on its way towards the light? Me, John? I'm just a plain seagull, and you are the only son of the great gull, I suppose. Jonathan sighed and looked out of the sea. You don't need me any longer. You need to keep finding yourself a little more each day. That real, unlimited Fletcher Seagull. He is your instructor. You need to understand him and to practice him. A moment later, Jonathan's body wavered in the air, shimmering, and began to go transparent. Don't let them spread silly rumors about me or make me a god. Okay, Fletch? I am a seagull. I like to fly. Maybe. Jonathan, poor Fletch, don't believe what your eyes are telling you. All they show is limitation. Look with your understanding. Find out what you already know, and you will see the way to fly. The shimmering stopped. Jonathan Seagull had vanished into empty air. After a time, Fletcher Gull dragged himself into the sky and faced a brand new group of students eager for their first lesson. To begin with, he said heavily, you have got to understand that a seagull is an unlimited idea of freedom, an image of the great gull, and your whole body, from wingtip to wingtip, is nothing more than your thought itself. The young girls looked at him quizzically. Hey man, they thought, this doesn't sound like a rule for a loop. Fletcher sighed and started over. Ah, very well, he said, and eyed them critically. Let's begin with level flight. And saying that, he understood all at once that his friend had quite honestly been no more divine than Fletcher himself. No limits, Jonathan, he thought. Well then, the time's not distant when I'm going to appear out of thin air on your beach and show you a thing or two about flying. And though he tried to look properly severe for his students, Fletcher Seagull suddenly saw them all as they really were, just for a moment, and he more than liked, he loved what it was he saw. No limits, Jonathan, he thought, and he smiled. His race to learn had begun. So that's part three, friends, and what a great learnings that we had from this chapter as well. And there's so much that Jonathan Livingston Seagull is guiding us, and we can put ourselves in Jonathan's character. Like here, he's teaching being unlimited, where we think many a times that we are limited beings and we cannot do it, and we have to be somebody else, and we need this and that to do that. So no excuses, and any great master that we get inspired from is, like they are very simple. They have worked, they have practiced. That's how they have become great masters. And here Jonathan is conveying the same. It's just the practice. The more we are practicing for our own self and to better ourselves, we will also be that great master whom we will whom we can inspire so many. So as Patricio always says that you are a guru of your own self, you are a master of your own self. Your breath is your guru. and how simply he had taught us. Wonderful, wonderful. We are all Fletcher gulls that where we are learning so much from his teachings and um, great lessons that we have learned through his life and through his teachings. So when I'm reading this, I'm just recollecting the times that we had spent with Patrici and what he was showering the knowledge with. So very much grateful to this book and to Richard Bach and to all the masters who have inspired us in seen ways or unseen ways. So thank you so much for being here and listening, friends. And if you have anything to share, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Madhu. Good morning.
Hi, Meena.
Yeah, that's a beautiful book. I always keep listening. Whenever I find time, I just listen to the audiobook on the YouTube as well. That is the one book that it's back. I think he's a great master. Yes, I this Jonathan Seagull, the character that he created, gives us many lessons that in life, yes, we are limitless. That's the one message for me for that book. And just now you read in the chapter that we are not, but our body is nothing but a thought. That's very touching. There's so many statements that those beautiful lines always reminds us that we are limitless and boundless, and we are free to do anything. And whenever I see a seagull, when I walk by the lakes or beaches, I always gets in my mind, see Jonathan Seagull. This is the one. Every seagull is a Jonathan Seagull for me. Yeah, it's a
Wow.
wonderful book.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank you,
sharing.
Meena. And an interesting point in here is also that we have to see good in everyone. That point is very, we don't have to love or hate. It's just that we have to love the goodness that we see in them is again a wonderful point. And then there is no ill feelings towards anybody. We just accept as they are and we only see the good in them. So that
Yes.
is, yeah,
Yeah, sometimes when we have some disagreements or anything like that, we we get into that mind why did they behave that way, and we always try to uh, think that what has happened instead of what good they have explained to us, or what is that message they are trying to us.
yeah.
Yeah, that's very
Here,
good point.
my understanding is, Meena, that when we are in disagreements, we should not agree on, we should only disagree on that. We should not. What happens with many people is because of this disagreement, we leave the person. We should
Mm,
leave the disagreement, but we should not leave the person.
yes, wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, because that is just a part of it, right? That is just a part that happened in the life. That how can just that one part can influence our whole being to reject that person.
Mm,
So this is what here the Jonathan is conveying, that we have to accept everybody and we have to see good in them. There were many times when I was in India that I was like, there were so many arguments, there were so many disagreements that were happening because this was the long time that I stayed in India, and I always checked on myself whether I am rejecting that person or only rejecting the idea or the discussion that had happened. So yeah, here, I mean, like, the more we contemplate on this, then there is only inclusiveness. There is nothing that we exclude anybody. We just include everybody. So we don't leave the flock. Though we are an outcast, we want to be in the flock, and we want to show them how we can be limitless, because everyone is lost. So if we also push them away, then how is the where is it that they will find the light? and
yes.
and we have to be there. And yeah,
Okay.
we,
It's
yeah.
wonderful, wonderful, Mother. Thank you.
Thank you, Mina. Yeah, anybody else wants to share? And tomorrow is the last chapter, And last part of this, and this part, it has been published in 2013, though the book has been out on in the year 1970s. The book has been out. Only the three parts has been published. The fourth part has published in 2013. So it is an interesting chapter as well, which we can relate it to these times of what is happening. Yeah, wonderful. So, all right, then, if there is no sharings, then we will all see each other again tomorrow, the last day of the sharings. And till then, enjoy being with yourself and let us all fly high, and let's get inspired by our own self, by with our own practice, refining ourselves. All right, friends. Thank you so much and namaste to all.
Thank you, Madhu.